Two people sit down and eat the exact same meal. Same calories on the label. Same protein, same carbs, same fat, weighed precisely. Neither one exercises afterward. Neither one moves much at all. They just sit in a controlled room while researchers measure everything their bodies do. 6 hours later, one of them has burned nearly twice as many calories as the other, doing nothing. Same meal, on paper. When I first read that result, my honest reaction was that it had to be wrong. It breaks the model we were all handed, because we were all told the same thing since we were teenagers. A calorie is a calorie. The label is the truth. Nothing else matters. So I went looking for the flaw. I wanted to find the sloppy design, the tiny sample, the reason to throw the whole thing out. Instead, I found a second study pointing the same direction. Then I found the mechanism that explains both of them cleanly. And then I did the thing I slightly regret, which is I sat down and calculated what this quietly adds up to over a year. But here's the part that actually got under my skin, and it has nothing to do with numbers. It has to do with people you already know. Think about the people in your life who have simply always been lean. Not the ones with the tracking app, not the ones weighing chicken breasts, the ones who have genuinely never thought about their body composition in their life. They just eat, live, and stay roughly the same shape forever. Almost every one of them does the two things I'm about to describe. By accident. Without knowing why. Without ever once calling it a strategy. They have been collecting a small metabolic bonus every single day for their entire adult lives. And they have absolutely no idea it exists. So let me be completely upfront before we go further. Neither of these is a diet. Neither is exercise. Neither asks you to eat less food. That's not a marketing line to keep you watching. That's just what the research actually says when you read past the headline. Let's start with the study that genuinely rearranged how I think about food. It was published in a journal called Food and Nutrition Research. The design is beautifully simple, which is exactly why I trust it. They brought participants in and gave them a sandwich. That's the whole intervention. One version was the whole food sandwich. Multi-grain bread, real cheddar cheese, the kind of thing that still resembles the ingredients it came from. The other version was the processed sandwich. White bread, processed cheese product. Soft, uniform, engineered, and requiring almost no effort to chew or swallow. And here is the critical detail that makes this study matter. The two meals were matched. Identical calories, identical macronutrients, identical on every label. Then researchers measured something called the thermic effect of food. If that term is new to you, stay with me, because it explains everything else. Here's the idea in plain language. When you eat, your body does not receive that food for free. It has to pay a price first. It has to secrete enzymes. It has to physically break the food apart. It has to move nutrients across the gut wall and process them. Every one of those steps costs energy. That energy cost is the toll your body pays simply for the privilege of using what you ate. That toll is roughly 10% of everything you consume. It is a real slice of your daily burn that most people never think about. So they measured that toll on both sandwiches. Same calories in. They tracked energy expenditure carefully across the hours that followed the meal. The whole food sandwich cost the body around 137 calories to process. That energy went to digestion and never reached storage. The processed sandwich cost 73, roughly half. Same calories going in, dramatically different price paid on the way through the system. Sit with that, because the implication is strange. Around 64 calories that one group spent on digestion, the other group simply kept and stored. Not because they ate more. They did not eat more. They ate the identical number of calories and ended up with a different result. Those 64 calories appeared out of nowhere from the perspective of anybody carefully tracking food labels and trusting the number printed on the package. Now, you might be thinking you already know processed food is bad. You've heard it 1,000 times. You're ready to click away. Hold on, because I don't think you've heard this specific version. Every other time, the argument was about calories, sugar, additives, or overeating. That is not what we're discussing. We're discussing identical calories, identical macros, identical everything, where the food still costs your body a completely different amount. The problem is not what's inside it. The problem is what it fails to ask of you. That distinction is the entire point here. And here's the mechanism, which is the part I find genuinely fascinating once you see it clearly. Food processing is essentially digestion performed in advance. When a factory mills a grain into fine flour, it is doing the work your teeth and stomach were originally built to do themselves. When it emulsifies fats, softens fiber, and grinds particles down to powder. It is quietly performing your digestive enzyme's job somewhere else entirely. By the time that food reaches your mouth, half the labor has already been completed for you, in a facility, by machinery you never saw. Your body does not reward you for that shortcut. It simply takes it. Because your body is not trying to be lean, it's trying to be efficient. That is the whole evolutionary logic. Every system inside you is tuned to extract maximum energy from minimum effort. That kept your ancestors alive. So when you hand your metabolism something pre-broken down and pre-digested, it doesn't thank you politely. It quietly pockets the difference and moves on. Now let's do the arithmetic, because this is where it stops being an interesting science fact and starts becoming the actual shape of your body. 64 calories from a single meal. Suppose you eat 2 processed meals daily, which for most people in a normal week is honestly conservative. That's 128 calories per day that you never ate but stored anyway. Calories that exist nowhere in your tracking app. Across a week, that's 896 calories, already almost a quarter of a pound, accumulated from nothing you actually put in your mouth. Across a month, that's roughly 3,500 calories. A pound of body fat sits somewhere around that same number. So that's a pound a month, appearing from calories you never consumed. Over a year, the arithmetic gives you something in the range of 12 pounds. And this right here is the thing I most want you to hear, because it describes an experience an enormous number of people have had. You're tracking carefully. You're weighing your food. You're hitting your target every single day, and the scale is still moving the wrong direction. You're standing there genuinely confused, wondering what you're doing wrong. And the answer might honestly be nothing. Your math was fine the whole time. Your body was simply running different math. You accounted for what went in. Nobody told you the processing cost was also part of the equation. Now, let me be honest about that 12-pound figure, because I think people throw extrapolations around and pretend they are predictions. They are not. Your body is not a spreadsheet. It adapts. Your appetite shifts. Your unconscious movement shifts. Deficits do not compound in a perfectly straight line forever. That number is a thought experiment about the scale of the effect. It is not a promise about what your specific next year looks like. So let's be aggressively conservative instead. Say you only do this once daily, one processed meal, the lunch you grab because you're between things. And say you log it perfectly and honestly. Even then, you're looking at roughly 6 pounds a year of pure invisible accounting error. 6 pounds you did not eat. 6 pounds that never appeared in any app, on any label, or in any calculation you were taught to make. Now I want to get specific about the fat itself, because there's a difference between fat sitting under your skin and fat wrapped around organs. Visceral fat is the deeper kind. It packs around the liver, the intestines, the abdominal cavity. It's the fat that actually drives metabolic disease. That's the fat worth caring about, and there's a second piece of research that connects processed food directly to the conditions that build it. A controlled feeding trial ran adults through a metabolic ward for a month, 2 weeks eating ultra-processed food, 2 weeks eating whole food. Again, the diets were matched. Same calories available. Same sugar, fat, fiber, and macronutrients offered. But this time, people could eat as much as they wanted. On the ultra-processed diet, participants spontaneously ate roughly 500 extra calories per day. Nobody instructed them to. They simply did it. They weren't hungrier in any way they could describe. They just ate faster, and their satiety signals arrived too late to stop them. They gained weight on that arm. On the whole food arm, the exact same people eating freely with no restriction lost it instead. So stack the two effects together because they push in the same direction. Processed food costs less to digest, so you store more of it. And it's engineered to be eaten quickly enough that you consume more before your body registers fullness. Those two problems compound each other. Chronic surplus combined with low digestive cost is precisely the environment that preferentially drives fat into the abdominal cavity, around the organs where it does damage. Which means the reverse works too. Shifting toward whole food isn't a diet at all. You're not eating less, you're just closing a leak. You're no longer handing your metabolism a free pass on the work it was designed to do. That's the entire intervention. Nothing more dramatic than that. Now for the second thing. This one is stranger, completely free, and takes about 4 seconds of your day. It's water. And I know exactly what happens when someone says drink more water. Everyone's eyes glaze over. It's the most generic health advice on the planet. It's what people say when they have nothing else to offer. So let me give you the specific version because the specifics change everything here. There's a randomized controlled trial published in the journal Nutrients examining water intake and fat oxidation. Fat oxidation means the rate you actually burn stored fat. The first finding is that drinking water raises energy expenditure. That's been demonstrated before, so it isn't surprising on its own. But keep going. Earlier research found measurable bumps in metabolic rate after drinking a decent volume of cold water, partly from warming that water to body temperature. But the more interesting finding was about who benefited most. And this is where the study stops being predictable and starts being genuinely useful. In people who were metabolically inflexible, the effect was substantially stronger than in already healthy participants. That's not usually how these studies turn out. Metabolic inflexibility means the machinery letting you switch cleanly between burning carbohydrates and burning fat isn't working well. It describes a lot of people. Usually in research like this, the healthy participants get the better response. Here, the people who needed it most actually got more from it. And now here's the condition attached, which is the detail almost nobody mentions and the reason this advice usually sounds useless when repeated. The fat oxidation effect showed up powerfully when water was consumed in a low insulin, low glucose state, meaning fasted, meaning genuinely empty stomach. When researchers examined the same water intake alongside carbohydrates with insulin elevated, that fat oxidation response largely vanished. Same water, completely different outcome. Mechanistically, that makes total sense, which is a large part of why I believe it. Insulin is fundamentally a storage signal in your body. One of its primary jobs is suppressing the enzyme that releases fat from your fat cells. Insulin effectively closes the door on fat-leaving storage. So it barely matters what else you do in that window. If insulin is elevated, any signal to burn fat is shouting through a closed door. But in a genuinely fasted state, insulin is low and that door is already open. Hydration nudges a system that's already heading the right direction, which makes the practical version almost insultingly simple. You wake up. Before food, before anything, you drink a real volume of water, not a sip, an actual glass or two in the window where your hormonal environment can genuinely do something with it. That's the entire protocol. Nothing else required. And this is exactly why I said the lean people you know are already doing this. They're not being strategic. They're just thirsty in the morning. They drink water because they woke up. They eat food that looks like food because that's what happens to be in their kitchen. They've been collecting this small daily advantage for years without deciding anything. It was never discipline. It was just the shape of their ordinary habits. Now let's put both pieces together, because separately they're interesting, and together they start to become something that actually moves the needle. Whole foods replacing processed foods with no change in total calories eaten gives you somewhere around 60 to 130 calories daily. Fasted hydration adds a modest but real amount on top of that. Not enormous on its own, but it stacks in the same direction. Realistically, you're looking at roughly 100 to 150 calories of additional metabolic breathing room per day. Every day. Without eating less. Without training. Without tracking anything. Without willpower, restriction, or any of the machinery that makes most nutrition advice collapse within 3 weeks. Now, I'm not going to sell you that as a transformation, because it isn't one. Nobody's life changes because of 130 calories. But it is precisely the difference between slowly gaining and slowly losing. And for most people, that margin is the entire thing that matters. The gap between the direction you're currently heading and the opposite direction is rarely dramatic. It's usually about this size, small, quiet, and compounding. And notice what neither of these actually asks from you. Neither is restriction. Neither is a rule you have to white-knuckle through a bad week. You're not eating less food. You're eating the same amount in a form that costs your body something real to break down and process. And you're drinking water at the specific point in your day when your hormones can actually act on it. That's the whole adjustment. If you want carbohydrates, eat carbohydrates. If you want fat, eat fat. This isn't an argument for any particular dietary camp or ideology. Protein does give you the best return on the thermic effect by a wide margin. That's a separate lever, and it's genuinely a strong one, but the core point holds regardless of how you divide your macronutrients. Whole food, whatever form it takes, simply costs more to run. I want to add one more thought, because I think it reframes this whole conversation in a way that's more useful than another rule. Most nutrition advice is built around subtraction. Eat less. Cut this out. Restrict that. Hold the line until your willpower eventually runs out. What we've talked about here is different. It's not subtraction. It's about the same food asking more of your body on the way through. That's a genuinely easier thing to sustain, because sustainability was never about motivation. It was about whether a change demands something from you daily. These two don't. Choosing an apple over apple-flavored something requires no discipline once it's simply what you keep in your kitchen by default. Drinking water when you wake up requires no discipline either. It requires a glass near the sink and about 2 weeks of repetition. And that's really the underlying lesson in both studies. Your body is not broken. It is not sabotaging you. It is not cheating. It is efficient, and it will always take the shortest available path to energy. That's not a flaw. That kept your species alive for millennia. The problem is that the modern food supply is essentially a machine for manufacturing shortcuts and handing them to a system built to accept them. Every processing step removes work your body would have otherwise performed. Every removed step is a small amount of energy you keep instead of spend. None of it shows up on a label. None of it appears in an app. It just accumulates quietly, year after year, invisibly, so the fix isn't complicated, and it isn't a diet. Stop handing your metabolism shortcuts. Make it work a little for the food you eat. Choose the version of food that still resembles what it was. Let your body pay the toll it was designed to pay. And drink some water before anything else touches your stomach, in the window where low insulin lets your body actually use that signal. That's it. No restriction, no plan, no tracking, just 2 small adjustments that quietly change the price your body pays for everything you eat. Do them long enough, and they stop being decisions entirely. They become the reason people assume you were simply always built this way.